You've been told Wall Street invented modern finance. That's a lie. The true blueprint was forged not on a stock exchange floor, but in the quiet, vaulted back rooms of a 15th century wool trader's shop, an institution so vast, so powerful, that its invisible architecture still dictates every financial transaction you make today. Its name wasn't Goldman Sachs, it was the Medici Bank. And it wasn't just a bank, it was a financial singularity that warped the very fabric of reality, politics, art, religion, and power around its balance sheet. In today's money, its influence and deployed capital would eclipse $100 trillion. This is the story of the ghost in the machine, the original sin of our financial system. But that influence came at a catastrophic hidden price, a price we are still paying. In 1397, Giovanni de Medici registered his Arte del Cambio, his money-changing table, in Florence. The city was a cauldron of warring elites drowning in a chaotic sea of different coins from 100 different states. Currency was a gamble. Trust was non-existent. Giovanni saw not chaos, but an opportunity for total control. His first innovation was deceptively simple: the Nostro and vostro ledger. 2 columns, our account and your account. It was the world's first synchronized double-entry bookkeeping system. This wasn't just better math. It was a godlike view of money. For the first time in history, capital could be tracked across borders with chilling precision. With this ledger as his weapon, Giovanni attacked the greatest financial bottleneck of the medieval world, the papacy. Collecting tithes and taxes across Europe was a logistical nightmare, plagued by robbery and corruption. Giovanni made the Pope an offer: don't physically move the money. Send letters of credit. A bishop in England could deposit local coin with a Medici agent. The agent would issue a bill. The Pope in Rome would present that bill and receive Florentine gold. The money never moved. Only the information did. The Medici had just invented financial teleportation, and they charged a ruthless fee for every transaction. The true currency was no longer gold. It was information. Under Giovanni's son, Cosimo de Medici, the bank exploded. It wasn't a single entity. It was a decentralized network of semi-independent partnership branches: Venice, Geneva, Bruges, London. Each branch manager was a partner, sharing in profits and losses. This alignment of incentives was genius. It was also a fatal flaw, planted like a financial landmine. The manager in Bruges, Tommaso Portinari, would make catastrophic bets to inflate his own share, but that disaster was decades away. For now, the system minted money and power. The Medicis didn't just finance the Renaissance, they weaponized it. They became the shadow rulers of Christendom. Look at the numbers. At its peak, around 1450, the Medici Bank held depositor wealth equivalent to tens of billions in today's dollars. But through the magic of fractional reserve banking, lending out far more than they physically held, their financial influence was exponentially greater. They bankrolled kings, dukes, and popes. They monopolized the alum trade, a mineral essential for dyeing wool and the medieval equivalent of controlling oil. They placed family agents in the Vatican treasury. They foreclosed on entire silver mines. This wasn't banking. This was a silent financial coup d'etat of the Western world. Their greatest asset, however, was debt. Not their debt, everyone else's. They turned obligation into an instrument of total control. Power doesn't crown kings, it underwrites them. The art, the architecture, the glorious facade of Florence. It was a PR campaign funded by laundered profits. Cosimo financed the Duomo's majestic dome. He rebuilt the convent of San Marco. He filled libraries with ancient texts. This philanthropy was a calculated political shield. It bought legitimacy. It distracted from the cold, usurious reality of the ledger. It made the Medicis beloved by the people, even as they bled them dry with hidden fees and currency exchanges. The system was perfect, until the pattern of all empires reasserted itself. Greed, family, dysfunction, and the inherent instability of their own creation converged. The ledger always tells the truth, eventually. The cracks started with vanity. Branch manager Tommaso Portinari in Bruges loaned the equivalent of hundreds of millions to Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, to finance his wars. It was a bet to make Tommaso a kingmaker. It was also a violation of Medici rule: never lend to men with armies, for they simply refuse to repay. Charles died in battle. The loans vanished. The Bruges branch collapsed, dragging others with it. Back in Florence, successive Medici leaders were not bankers. They were princes, more interested in political power than balance sheets. They began borrowing colossal sums from their own bank for palaces and politics. The central ledger was being cannibalized by its own creators. A familiar story of elite self-dealing. Then came the final structural blow, a cascade of sovereign defaults. Edward IV of England defaulted on his massive Medici loans. The Duke of Milan defaulted. These weren't business losses. They were black holes in the ledger. The decentralized partnership model meant each collapsing branch could poison the whole network. The family tried to hide the rot, using money from new investors to pay old depositors, a Ponzi scheme centuries before the name existed. By 1494, the French army marched on Florence. The populace, sensing weakness, revolted. They expelled the Medici and stormed their palace. What they found in the back offices was a financial corpse. The greatest bank in the world was a hollow shell. The mob lit a bonfire of the vanities in the town square, burning luxuries and art. But the real fire had already consumed the ledgers. The bank was liquidated. The Medici were exiled. It was a dramatic, fiery end. But here's the hidden truth. The bank died. The system it invented did not. Its DNA was already replicating. The double-entry ledger, the branch network, the letters of credit, the sovereign debt financing, even the reckless intertwining of high finance and high politics, all of it survived. It migrated north, to the banks of Augsburg, to Antwerp, and finally to the city of London. The Medicis built a machine they could not ultimately control, but once built, the machine could not be uninvented. We are all living inside their experiment. Look at your world. The currency in your bank account isn't paper, it's data on a server. Your mortgage is a securitized bond traded in nanoseconds. Sovereign nations are graded by credit agencies. This is the Medici legacy, not the stone palaces of Florence, but the invisible, algorithmic architecture of global trust. Their system solved a primal problem, moving value through a world that doesn't trust itself. We still don't trust each other, so we perfected their machine. We outsourced our faith to the digital ledger, but the fatal flaws were outsourced too. The 2008 financial crisis was a Medici collapse, played at light speed. Decentralized, incentivized branches? That was Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns taking wild risks for their share of the bonus pool. Sovereign debt defaults? That was mortgage-backed securities, individual promises to pay, bundled and sold until the original risk was invisible. Using new money to cover old losses? That was the entire shadow banking system, a digital ledger spinning out of control. The system didn't fail because it was new. It failed because it was 600 years old. We are trapped in a cycle of their design, a cycle of innovation, concentration, collapse, and rebirth. The Medicis show us the three immutable laws of financial power. First, he who controls the ledger controls reality. Their ledger gave them a God's eye view. Today, that ledger is blockchain, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, the SWIFT network. The entity that controls the most accurate, trusted record of transactions holds the real power. Second, debt is the sharpest instrument of control. They didn't just want wealth, they wanted obligors. Kings on the hook. Today, it's nations drowning in sovereign debt, consumers in student and credit card loans. An obligor is a compliant actor. And the third, most dangerous law, financial innovation always outpaces human wisdom. The Medicis invented tools they could not ethically govern. We have done the same again and again. The tools evolve. The human flaws do not. So what do? You are not a Medici prince. You are an individual standing before their vast inherited machine. The actionable insight is not to try and break the machine. It is to understand its rhythm, to see the patterns they engraved into the very concept of money. Protect yourself by recognizing the phase of the cycle we are in. Are we in the innovation phase, like Giovanni's early ledgers, where new tools, crypto, AI finance are emerging? Are we in the concentration phase, like Cosimo's peak, where power funnels to a few elite players? Or are we in the late-stage cannibalization phase, where the insiders loot the system to sustain their own status? The signs of that final phase are always the same: soaring sovereign debt, elites using complex instruments to hide risk, the blending of political and financial power into an indistinguishable blob. Your survival, your leverage, depends on this diagnosis. In the cannibalization phase, the classic Medici endgame, trust in the central ledger begins to fracture. The system doesn't collapse from the edges in, but from the core outward. The hard assets, the tangible commodities, the productive land, the essential resources the Medicis always fell back on, separate in value from the financial promises built upon them. This is not a signal to panic. It is a signal to see clearly, to build your own personal ledger of value independent of the decaying promises. Do not trust the vehicle. Understand the road. It was built centuries ago, and it leads to predictable destinations. The Medici shadow is $100 trillion long because its true product was never money. It was the framework, the system that turns trust into a tradable commodity and then betrays that trust for profit in a predictable, centuries-long oscillation. We have spent 600 years adding epicycles to their financial astronomy, trying to make a flawed model work. The family died, the bank burned, but the ghost they summoned, the idea that all human endeavor can be reduced to a debit and a credit, and that those who control the ledger rule the world, that ghost never left. It is the silent partner in every central bank, the invisible signature on every bailout, the ancient code in every line of algorithmic trade. You cannot escape its game, but you can learn its rules. You can read the patterns in the chaos. You can see the modern princes and popes taking out their doomed loans. You can identify the Portinaris in distant branches, making catastrophic bets with your future. And you can decide, with cold clarity, not to be the final, unwitting investor in their age-old Ponzi scheme. Build your own resilience. Seek assets the system cannot easily dilute. Value knowledge over speculation. Understand that every financial instrument is ultimately a promise, and every promise in this inherited system carries the ancient, metallic taste of Medici gold, and the faint, inevitable scent of smoke. The machine must feed, but you do not have to be its fuel. If you learned something new today, hit subscribe. There's always more history waiting to be uncovered here on Econ Prime.